All right, let's dive into the world of corporate finance, where a single accounting entry can be a real double-edged sword. On one side, it's a sign of a bold, strategic move to rebuild a company. But on the other, well, it can be a tool for some pretty clever deception, designed to fool even savvy investors. So, here's a question for you, and it's a weird one. Why on earth does Wall Street sometimes cheer when a company announces billions, and I mean billions, in losses? I mean, it makes no sense, right? A huge loss should be bad news, but suddenly the stock is soaring. This is the big mystery we're going to crack today. Think of us as financial detectives on a case. Okay, the answer to that mystery? It often comes down to this strategic move that accountants call the big bath. It's basically a company deciding to get all its bad news out in one single massive hit. But, to really understand how they do that, we need to look at the very specific tool they use to make it happen. And that tool, the key piece of evidence in this whole puzzle, is something called a restructuring provision. So what exactly is that? Well, think of it this way. Imagine a company decides it's time for a massive overhaul. They're going to close a factory or lay off a whole division. They know that's not free. There are going to be costs down the road, severance packages for employees, penalties for breaking a building lease, that kind of thing. A restructuring provision is basically the company saying, okay, we're going to estimate all those future costs and put that amount on our financial statements right now, today. And honestly, that's just good accounting. It's supposed to give investors a clear, upfront picture of the real financial damage from a big decision. But here's the kicker. The key word in all of this is estimate. And whenever you have estimates in accounting, you have human judgment. And whenever you have judgment, well, that's where things can get really interesting. That's where there's an opportunity for games. Okay, so before we can spot the crime, we have to know the law, right? So let's take a look at the official rule book to see how this is all supposed to work. So you've got two main sets of rules in the world: IFRS, which is used pretty much globally, and US GAAP for the United States. And check out the key difference here. It's all about timing. Under the international rules, you can often book those costs as soon as you announce the plan. But here in the US, the rules are stricter. You generally have to wait until you've actually incurred the cost. It sounds like a small detail, but trust me, it can totally change when a company takes a big hit to its profits. Let's dig into that international rule a little more, because the logic behind it is really important. It's not enough for a bunch of executives to just decide on a plan in a boardroom. To record the provision, they have to create what's called a constructive obligation. It's a two-part test. First, you need a detailed, formal plan, and second, you have to actually tell the people who are going to be affected, like the employees. The idea is, once you've announced it and created that valid expectation, you're pretty much committed. You can't just change your mind. You're on the hook. And the rules are also super specific about what costs you can and cannot include. This is absolutely critical. Things that are a direct result of shutting something down. Think severance pay, penalties for breaking a lease. Those are in. But anything related to the future of the business? Nope, absolutely not. So retraining the staff that are staying or launching a new marketing campaign, that's a no-go. And there's a great reason for this. It stops companies from trying to sneak their normal ongoing business expenses into this big one-time restructuring charge. All right, so we've got the evidence, we've read the rule book. Now for the fun part. Let's open up the criminal playbook and see how these rules get broken. So you're probably thinking, wait a minute, if the rules are so black and white, how do companies actually get away with this stuff? And it's a great question. It all comes back to that one powerful, squishy word, estimation. Okay, the first play from the book is the most famous one, the big bath. Here's the scenario. A new CEO takes over, or maybe the company is already having a terrible year. The new boss thinks, hey, this year is already a write-off. Let's throw everything, including the kitchen sink, into this one massive loss. They deliberately overestimate all the restructuring costs. They basically take all the pain at once. And Wall Street kind of shrugs and says, okay, one bad year, new management, we get it. But what they've really done is wiped the slate clean, making it way easier to look like a hero when profits miraculously bounce back next year. The second move is a bit sneakier. It's called creating a cookie jar reserve. So a company will intentionally set aside way more money than they actually need for a restructuring. They're overfunding the provision. This creates a secret stash, a hidden rainy day fund, a cookie jar. Then, let's say a year later, a quarter isn't looking so hot and they're about to miss their profit target. What do? They just reach into that cookie jar, reverse some of that old provision, and poof, that money magically flows back and boosts the current quarter's earnings. It creates this totally fake illusion of steady, predictable growth. Now, this isn't just some academic theory. This stuff happens in the real world. So let's open up a case file on one of the most infamous examples, the Nortel scandal. So here's how they did it. Back in 2002, Nortel took a huge, big bath, creating these massive reserves, a giant cookie jar. Then, in 2003, the actual business was still in trouble, but management really wanted to report a profit. So you guessed it, they reached into that cookie jar and pulled out some of those excess reserves. And just like that, an operating loss was transformed into a reported profit. And the best part for them? That fake profit triggered millions and millions of dollars in executive bonuses. And make no mistake, this wasn't some honest accounting error. The SEC's findings were pretty clear. This whole thing was designed from the ground up to create a return to profitability that was based purely on accounting tricks, not on any real improvement in the business. It was pure fiction. Just how bad was it? Well, the fallout was huge. In fact, the manipulation was so blatant that it pushed Nortel into the bottom 1% of all publicly traded companies when it came to accounting quality. I mean, you can't get a bigger red flag than that. Okay, so after all that, how can you protect yourself? How can you become a better financial detective? Because that's the real goal here, to give you the tools to spot this stuff on your own. Well, the good news is you're not alone. Regulators are getting way more sophisticated. The SEC, for instance, has what they call an EPS initiative. They're using data analytics to automatically flag companies that consistently, quarter after quarter, just barely beat their earnings targets. You know, by a single penny. That's not usually skill. It's often a sign that a cookie jar is being used to manage the number. And here are the red flags you can look for yourself. This is your detective's toolkit. First, be suspicious of a company that seems to be restructuring all the time, but their actual performance never gets any better. Second, look out for big reversals of old provisions that don't come with a really good explanation. Third, if a company hits its analyst targets exactly every single time, that's almost too good to be true. And finally, if their disclosures about the restructuring are super vague, that's a huge warning sign. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to this. These restructuring provisions aren't automatically good or bad. They're just a tool. The real key is learning how to read the story behind the numbers, so you can tell the difference between a smart strategic move and just pure financial fiction. So now you've seen the playbook. The next time you read an earnings report and see a massive restructuring charge, you won't just take it at face value. You'll know what to look for, and you'll know what questions to ask. The real story is waiting for you to find it.